Hey everybody, what's up from Pokemon Classics? Reminding you all that the classics never go out of style. Today we're in for another auction recap video in which we count down and look at some of the biggest auctions of the week. Now this one you're going to want to stick around to the end because there are some really high-end trophy cards and promo cards that simply don't come up for sale very often, so be on the lookout for some fireworks here at the end. Anyway guys, I think to switch it up, we'll start out this week with some modern cards, so let's roll into it. We'll go ahead and kick things off with some PSA 10s, beginning with this Pikachu VMAX from Vivid Voltage. This is the big rainbow rare one, and this one sold for $240. We also have the Latios team-up card, and this is a really popular one out there, and this one coming in at just under $2,000 in a PSA 10. We'll follow that up with something from Chilling Reign, and that's the Blaziken VMAX, another card that's pretty popular out there, and this one sold for $432. Of course, we got to talk about 151. It's my personal favorite of the modern sets, and the Charizard card is the highest value one, and this one sold for $305 in a PSA 10. Speaking of Charizards, I wanted to check in with the Celebrations Charizard. This was from the Classic Collection, and it sold for $186. And this does seem to be up a little bit. It's been trending down for a long time. The last few sales I've seen have bucked the trend and have emerged in the 170 plus range, so a little something to keep an eye on there. Now, the big story in the Pokemon market recently has to do with full art Sword and Shield cards, which have taken a pretty heavy hit in the last few months. Anyway, I've included some charts for these next few. First, we have the Sleepy Tyranitar from Battle Styles. Really cool artwork on this one, and it sold for $222.50 in a PSA 10. And as you can see from the price chart with the white X, that's down pretty substantially from its all-time high, which was peaking at about $400 just a few months ago. The same could be said about the Gengar VMAX. This one's from Fusion Strike, and in a PSA 10 it sold for $525 and just 1 cent. Again, looking at the price chart, that's down quite a bit from its all-time high, between the $750 and $800 range. Now, one of the ones that I really like personally is the Rayquaza VMAX. This one's from Evolving Skies. It's a beautiful card, and this one sold for $520 in a PSA 10. As the trend goes, this one is also down a bit, where it was originally peaking in between $600 and $700, probably about the $650 mark. Next, we got the Giratina V, and this one's from Lost Origin. This one is holding up a little bit better than some of the others. This one sold for $740 in a PSA 10, but you will see it's dropped a little bit from its all-time highs as well. Next is my favorite of the full arts, and that's the Lugia V from Silver Tempest. This one sold for $332, a little bit more affordable than some of the others, and in my opinion, a bit better looking aesthetically. Again, though, this one's seen a pretty substantial dip, taking it all the way back to its price target from about a year ago. Finally, from the full arts on this list, we have the Umbreon VMAX. This is the one everyone talks about. It's the Moonbreon, and in a PSA 10, this one sold for $1,110. That's a binary price target, if you ask me. But anyway, look at the price target of that one. This one is down from about $1,500 to $1,600 at its peak, so a little bit of a correction there for Moonbreon. We also had a lot of vintage booster boxes come to auction this week, some of which we don't see very often. This week, we saw 2 different base set booster boxes for sale, including this one that was opened and verified, and this one sold for $12,000. Now, there's also a copy that remains sealed, and the sealed copy sold for substantially more at $16,875, so a bit of a premium there, perhaps, for the unopened box. We also had a Jungle Unlimited box sell for $7,500, and the same box in first edition sold for $11,875. Now, one of the things I found kind of interesting is the Japanese version of the Jungle Box sold for almost the same price point at $11,100. Now, we also got to cover Fossil, and we did have the Unlimited Fossil box sell for $7,812.50. The first edition Fossil box sold for $11,875, and just like what happened with Jungle, the Fossil Japanese box was a very close price to the first edition English version. This one sold for $11,100. Now, base set 2 is not my favorite set. Maybe it's yours, but probably not. But anyway, this one sold for $8,437.50. We also had a first edition Team Rocket box. This one generally does better than some of the other older WotC boxes, and this one sold for $13,125. Gym Heroes, only the first edition one here, no unlimited, but the first edition box sold for $12,187.50. Now we get into some that are a bit more rare, starting with this Neo Genesis box, first edition, and this one sold for $25,200. These cards are very difficult to grade, packs are pretty scarce, and it's one of the best sets out there in my humble opinion. Now, if that's not enough, we also had first edition Neo Revelation sell, this one for $27,000. This is a very difficult box to find, and you do have the opportunity to pull either Shining Magikarp or Shining Gyarados if you happen to get lucky, so probably a reason why this box carries a premium. Speaking of a premium, Legendary Collection is another box that is not well circulated. This one was not produced as much as some of the earlier WotC sets, and so finding this box is difficult. The price tag on this one sold for $52,500. And finally, we have one more box. This one was the champion of all the boxes on the list, and it sold for $52,800, and that's the Sky Ridge booster box. After that, it only makes sense to go from vintage boxes into vintage cards, so next we'll take a look at some vintage slabs. I wanted to start by highlighting some first edition base set sales, beginning with this first edition Charizard in BGS 9. This one sold for $16,800. Now there's also a PSA 8 copy for sale this week, and this one sold for $8,845. As you can see from the price graph, this is down quite a bit from where it's been stabilizing. Lately, this card's been selling for about $10,000, so this one's coming up a little bit short from the overall trend. Now there's also a tag copy, a Tag 8, relatively new grading company out there, and as a result, not earning quite as much as a more established company like PSA. Nevertheless, this card sold for $7,320, which is a pretty good chunk of change. We had a first edition Blastoise from base set and PSA 9 sell for $5,185, which is up quite a bit from where it's typically been selling. We also have a Venusaur in PSA 9 first edition selling for $2,806. I also wanted to highlight some CGC 10s this week, and all three Evolutions from Jungle were for sale without the symbol. This is the no symbol Jungle Error, and the Jolteon sold for $900. Similarly, the Vaporeon also sold for $900, and the odd one out here was the Flareon selling for $660. Again, these are all missing the jungle symbol on them, and because of that, they're highly collectible. We also had a first edition Alakazam from base set sell for $5,160 in a CGC 10, a Dragonite first edition selling for $1,680. There's even a Sabrina's Gengar. I know this is probably the most popular card in the Gym Hero set. This one sold for $1,230. And if you ask me, out of all the Mews that have ever been produced, this one from Expedition is up there. Definitely a top 3 contender for me. This one sold for $1,080. I also wanted to highlight one more Gengar, and this one got the Pristine 10 from CGC. This one is from Sky Ridge, and it sold for $3,960. I know we tend to spend a lot of time looking at the high end, but I also wanted to include some PSA 9s this week of some of the more popular cards from the Wizards of the Coast era, one of which was this Sabrina's Gengar in PSA 9 first edition selling for $685. There's also the Rockets Mewtwo, first card out there to have 3 attacks, and this one sold for $280. Getting into some Neos, we've got Feraligatr. This is one of the 2 Feraligatrs, the less expensive of the 2, from Neo Genesis, and this one sold for $305 in first edition PSA 9. We've got the Pichu. I know a lot of people love this card. It's got a beautiful hollow background with the different colors. This one sold for $485. Staying with the Neos, we've got Slowking. This is one of the cards that's just impossible to find without a print line to achieve the PSA 10. So in a PSA 9, generally the best you can hope for. This one sold for $406.02. Taking a look at the next one, we got Typhlosion 17. This one is also impossible to grade in a PSA 10. That's why as a PSA 9, it still commands a premium. $1,110 for this one. And as you'll see, the other Typhlosion, much easier to grade, and in a PSA 10, still sold for less than the Typhlosion 17. This one sold for $1,050. Couple more PSA 9s to look at. We've got the Espeon from Neo Discovery in first edition selling for $521. Then, of course, we got to cover the Umbreon. The original Moonbreon, this is one of my favorite artworks of all time. PSA 9 selling for $1,230. In fact, if we take a look at the price chart of this Umbreon in PSA 9, it's done pretty well. It hasn't been as susceptible to those large volatile movements since the pandemic as a lot of other cards. So it's one of those situations where popularity is probably keeping this card relatively strong on the demand side. We also had a number of PSA 10s sell this week, including some really low population cards that don't come for sale very often. One of them was this Shadowless Nidoking card that sold for $990, which is just a hair under the 4-figure mark. We also had an Unlimited Chansey Gem Mint 10 sell for $2,000. This is one of the most difficult cards to grade in all of base set. We also had a Flareon first edition PSA 10 sell for $2,075, as well as a first edition Dark Dug Trio from the Team Rocket set. This one was $440. It's actually one of the more difficult cards to grade from the Team Rocket set. Speaking of difficult to grade is the Koga's Beedrill, and this one I was surprised by the low price point. I thought this one would sell for a bit more, but at $627 for a Gem Mint 10 from PSA, and this is the first edition copy. Another card that is very difficult to grade with just a population of 22 is the Heracross from Neo Genesis in first edition. This one sold for $3,650. In fact, if we take a look at the price range here, you'll see that this is down quite a bit from its all-time highs in 2022, but this card doesn't have a lot of sales data out there for obvious reasons. Next, we've got the Magneton from Neo Revelation. This card has an even lower population with just 20 copies in PSA 10. This one sold for $1,620. Another card with the same population of population 20 is the Porygon 2 from Neo Revelation. First edition copy here. This one sold for $1,620. Same price point as the Magneton. Not the most popular Pokemon, but very difficult to grade cards. Finally, the last English vintage card I wanted to cover is this first edition Ivy Pikachu promo number 1. Now, this is actually the very first secret rare released by Wizards of the Coast, and this one in a PSA Mint 9 is a very difficult card to come by, and is one of my personal favorites because of the history. This one sold for $2,562. As we can see from the price graph, that might actually be an all-time high for this card. Now, I don't know if it was paid for or if it was shilled, but like I said, it's a card that I really like. I found this result fascinating. Next, let's turn our attention to some Japanese sales. We'll kick this section off with some no rarity base set holos. They're missing the rarity symbol down in the bottom right corner, and the Blastoise and PSA 8 sold for $1,890. There's also a Charizard as a BGS 8, and this one sold for $4,440. And there is also a Gyarados in PSA 9, which sold for $2,190. A lot of people revere these as the original first edition cards when it comes to Pokemon, because these ones were released allegedly before the rarity versions were circulated. Some other Japanese cards that sold this week include this Jolteon from Jungle set in PSA 10 selling for $192, the Flareon from Jungle selling for $276, and the Snorlax selling for $312. Now, if we turn our attention to Fossil set, we have a PSA 10 there as well of Dragonite, and this one sold for $375. And then the Sabrina's Gengar. This one is actually on the banned artworks list because of the tombstones and graveyard in the background. This one sold for $690 in a PSA 10. In fact, if we take a look at the price chart on that one, you can see that that one's actually a bit up from where it's typically been, so maybe this card is seeing a little bit more attention recently. I also felt obligated to highlight some of the modern cards that achieved the ever-elusive Black Label 10, along with the premium that it brings, starting with the Sylveon that sold for $3,360, the Gengar VMAX from Fusion Strike going for $4,320, there's the Giratina V selling for $5,100, and right at the top of the pinnacle here, top of the mountain, we've got the Rayquaza VMAX selling for $8,400. That's quite a Black Label premium. This last category was hopefully worth the wait because we're covering some high-end trophy and promo cards that went for quite a bit of money. First, we have a full art Mario Pikachu selling for $5,500 in a PSA 10. We also had the half art Mario Pikachu in a PSA 10 selling for $1,350. And if that's not enough Mario Pikachu for you, we have the combo platter featuring both Mario Pikachus and both Luigi Pikachus selling combined for $11,346. Now, we also had some illustration contest winner. This third grade winner card sold for $5,160 as a PSA 10. And I'm not sure what the origin is behind this one. It's the same year, and it's sold for $9,900 in a PSA 10. And then there's the Arceus one from a year earlier in 2009, selling for $19,800. Now, another card that's elusive out there is the University Magikarp. This card usually sells for a premium regardless of the grade. This one's a BGS 8, selling for $6,600. Another Magikarp is the Fan Club Shining Magikarp. This one in a PSA 10 selling for $49,200. That is a hefty price tag for a small little fish. Next, we have the Bilingual Executor card, and this is from the 1999 Tropical Mega Battle. Now, this card has a lot of history behind it. It also features English text as well as Japanese text, so it really is a unique card. Now, this one is about as perfect of condition as you could possibly hope for in a CGC Pristine 10, and all of those factors combined are likely why this card sold for $59,780. And last on this week's list, we have the OG, the Pikachu Illustrator card. This one in a PSA 7, and it sold for $209,841. Anytime you hear Pikachu Illustrator, you know it's going to come with a high price tag. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to pay tribute to top 10 Pokemon with this week's Auction of the Week. This week, there's actually 3. First, we have this Alpha Playtest Squirtle card, and I know these are a bit controversial because they're not technically Pokemon cards, but they were part of the early process, design, and prototyping for Pokemon while it's still in its infancy. I believe the backs of these cards were added further down the road. I'm not exactly sure how that whole process went down. What I can tell you is this CGC 9.5 Squirtle sold for $36,600. You can probably tell where the other 2 cards are going. We're going to see the other 2 starters, one of which was the Charmander, and this one earned a CGC Mint 9, and this one sold for $34,160. Finally, as Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur never gets the same love as his 2 brethren. The Bulbasaur in CGC 9 earned $29,280. So, not quite getting to that 30K Bulbasaur mark that was always joked about, but this is as close as we've come and probably ever will. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this auction recap video. There were some amazing items for sale this week, but I'm sure I missed a few, so definitely let me know down in the comments below if there were any noteworthy sales that you think I should be informed about. Also, let me know your thoughts about the current state of the market, particularly what we're seeing happen with some of those full art modern cards. Anyway, guys, I'm Pokemon Classics, reminding you all that the classics never go out of style. Till next time, everybody, stay well, have fun, and don't forget to enjoy collecting. That's really what this is all about. Bye, everybody.